Welcome to the Digital Strategies to Improve the Performance of Pharmaceutical Supply Chains session. I will now turn things over to our presenter.
Thank you. Thanks for your, and thanks everybody for your time. I will start it now. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Dr. Manish Shashi. I'm based in New Jersey, United States. And I sincerely thank you all for participating and discussing my doctoral research. The topic was digital strategy to improve the performance of pharmaceutical supply chains. I would also like to thank my chair, Dr. Gossett. We call him Dr. G, and then without him, this probably would not have been completed. He is my mentor also. So I'm very happy to see him joining this thing. Thank you, Dr. G. Before I start, let me take you all with a basic definition of digital strategy, or we call it a digitalization also, and supply chain. This will help us to understand the process better and the slide better. So when we call it a digitalization, what exactly we mean by the digitalizations? The basic definitions, and that's being used in, that was used in my research also. Here we use the digitized data. A lot of data are there in the analog. So in the digitalization process, we use the digitalized data, or the data which is in the soft copy form. Here we also use digital strategy, technology, and what it does, it leads to your change in business processes, and the model that you use, it provides you new revenue and the value adding opportunity. So basically, in nutshell, digital strategy is nothing. It's the vision and tactics of running the business differently by renovating your business processes and business models that we enable by digital enablers, about which I'll discuss more in detail in the subsequent slides. Some of the digital enablers that we use in pharmaceutical supply chain, in the industrial IoT, blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning. There are so many digital enablers that I did research in my paper, that I will tell you more about that once we go to the subsequent slide. Now let's go to the supply chain. What exactly is the supply chain? From the layman perspective, the definition is, it is the management of flow and goods and services, and it includes all the processes that transform your raw material into final product and maximize quality, delivery, customer experience, and profitability to the organizations. And in the turn, it helps the social cause also. We'll talk more about from the pharmaceutical supply chain perspective. And based on that, pharmaceutical supply chain is a subset of that. It is the means through which prescription medicines are manufactured and delivered to the patient. So everything from top to the bottom, from demand to the supply, everything comes under supply chain. And pharmaceutical supply chain is a subset of supply chain. Here we talk about mostly the prescription medicines or generic drugs or diagnostic or all this thing that is being used in treating the patients. So when we call it a patient, it's not only the human, it's animal and any living beings. So this was all about the definition. Can we go to the next slide, Mallory? Excellent. So let's go to the some of the important thing. You know, these are basically the foundation, or I'll call it a framework that we use it here. So the first thing of any research or of any work, typically in the doctoral area, is start with your business problems. So exactly what are the business problem, or what exactly were the problem by which I started this research? There might be some basis. So if you see from the statistics point of view, there was a firm in China, manufacturing firm. In 2017, they have got a $17 billion in lost revenue. This is all because of supply chain disruptions. It's not because of supply chain not managing properly or managing in a very distorted way, in the manual way, in the linear format. And one of the researcher, Kalamadi, in 2017, he told, like, the supply chain complexity is going every day, and that is resulting in disruption and impacting organization performance and increasing cost anywhere. So if the cost is increased, obviously the ultimately the impact comes on the patient or on the end customers as such. They have to pay more. So that is a bad situation for everybody, all the stakeholders in the ecosystem. The general business problem that we started is the pharmaceutical managers. They are losing the efficiency, visibility. When we call it a visibility, it's end-to-end visibility, profitability of the organizations, and ultimately business, either by the existing player or by the new incumbent, by not digitalizing their supply chain system. And the specific business problem that we work here in the doctoral, that pharmaceutical managers who are not using the digitalization, they obviously don't have a strategy. They obviously don't have a vision to digitalize their system. Next, I'll go for the purpose statement. I did a multiple case study. This was a qualitative, and the purpose was just to explore the strategy which the pharmaceutical managers, they have utilized, they have implemented to digitalize their integrated supply chain system. Integrated supply chain system, it just like right from the demand up to the supply. So that we call it integrated, completely integrated, where we have the internal as well as the external stakeholders. When we call it a significance, this is very, very important, because the problem here is, if you're not embracing, if you're not adopting digitalization in your supply chain process, you are going to have significant threat. Significant threat, I mean to say, you're losing the business, you're going out of the business, you are going, right now we see a lot of supply chain processes is broken in the United States and everywhere in the world after COVID as such. So this is all because the organization previously didn't pay much attention either to the resiliency or to the sustainability, or they didn't develop your ecosystem to include everybody actually in the time of crisis like present. So that's the significance. If it's like, if we do a digitalizations, then it will increase the efficiency and effectiveness of a supply chain. Ultimately, it leads to the improvement of performance and profitability of the organizations, and it helps everybody. The conceptual framework in the qualitative or in the quantitative as well, like we have to have a framework. Without framework, you can't do that. All your research questions, all your literatures and everybody has to be revolve around the framework. This is a starting point. So for me, the conceptual framework that I've selected for my research was theory of constraints. This was introduced by Goldrats through one of which novel called The Goals. It's nothing just a system-based management philosophy, but very, very strong, and a lot of organization uses this. Typically in the industry, typically in the manufacturing organization, a lot of organization does this. Even the service industry also uses this. It's basically, it defines the constraint, like, at one time one constraint, and we define the root cause. Root cause, I mean to say the constraint that I will introduce later, that is limiting your system from achieving higher performance or even the optimal performance. Like some of the, say for instances, if you're playing a soccer game and if your forward is not very strong, even though your defense and midfield is strong, actually if your forward is strong, you can't do any goal to the oppositions. So that's a constraint. If you try to optimize your forwards, like, you may get a goal and then you may win the game. That's what actually all this framework is there. And that same analogy I've applied here for my research. Like if you have a linear or non-digitalized or the weak supply chain, that will limit the performance of the entire supply chain, and in turn it may limit the performance of entire organizations. Can I go to the next slide? Excellent. So relevant scholarship, I just try to put some of the statistics that will help us to understand more. A lot of work already been done in the digitalization area, a lot of statistics, a lot of research already been done. There's a very famous researcher, Paul. So in 2017, he did research, and his research shown that, and he talked to the different business owners. 27% of the business owners have suffered damage to their reputations. 58% reported lost productivity, and 38% reported reduced revenue by the supply chain disruptions, by the supply chain issues. So that was all done by Paul in 2017. Another very famous researcher, Khan and Gokar, in 2018, they told, like, if you're doing a digitalization, if you're introducing a digitalizations or the digital strategy, and if you are improving your model, then you can expect 4.1% annual efficiency gain. That's a big number. Means I'm in the manufacturing area since last 28 years. I know, but even improving even for 1% efficiency year by year, actually it takes a lot of effort. So 4.1% is a very, very big number, and revenue by 2.9% per year. I will say it's just a starting point. You have a lot of scope to go ahead and then increase your revenue, actually more than even 10, 12 or 20% as such, if you organize your supply chain processes by introducing digital enablers and by using digital strategies. Can we go to the next slide? Excellent. So this is what we do. Whenever we're doing a research, we start with a research question, and your research question must revolve your problems, your literatures, your conceptual framework. So here, my research question was, what strategies do pharmaceutical manager they use to digitalize their integrated supply chain system to increase profitability and do the social benefits? So that was my research question. From the procedure perspective, I did a qualitative. And qualitative, I was the primary research instrument. So in the qualitative, generally we do a semi-structured interview. So I did semi-structured interview, and that each lasted from 30 minutes to 1 hour. And after interview, I transcribed the data in the sense whatever I spoke with them, and then I did a member checking just to ensure like everything is okay, and then I can go ahead with those data in my analytical tool. So those two were processed, and the other instrument that I found and that I've used in my research was the documentation. So this document, plenty of the documentation was shared by participants, like how they did, what exactly the constraint, what exactly the issue, and every organization is different. Actually, every organization does operate in a different manner. We can generalize something, but from pharmaceutical also, like some of the, say for instances, some of the company like Pfizer, they work on a certain area. Say Novartis work in a separate area. So every organization is different. Every organization does have their own sets of problems, their own sets of constraints. So plenty of the document that was shared by the participants, and quite a few documentations I have got it from their internet site, and that is open to the public. Some of the things like actually the success story and the benefits and their profit and loss accounting and all, actually that information you can get it from the website also, and that you can utilize this. So those two were the major thing by which I have collected my data. If I talk about participants, my first criteria was just to select the senior leaders who does have at least 5 years stay in that organization which did a supply chain digital strategy implementation. So that was the criteria. Most of the senior leaders whom I interviewed, everybody was having an experience of like beyond 25 to 30 years, but everybody at least stayed in the same organization for 5 years. So that was first of the criteria, and that's the reason it took time for me to select the leaders. But again, those were the basic thing, and I've selected participants from various pharmaceutical organizations in the United States, mostly from the East Coast. So that was all about my participants. And if you talk about data analysis, in the nutshell, I use methodological triangulation, which is very, very strong, because here you triangulate the data. Like you find it out, like there is no separate information, there is no more information is coming. And the moment you triangulate your data, you find like this is the thing. And you can go ahead and then you can utilize the data. For analysis, I've used a software called Atlas T. There is a German software, very, very strong software for the qualitative data analysis. Here, you put the data, you upload all your transcription and everything, you code the data, and then you can establish actually what are the key themes or patterns that you are looking for, based on the interviews as such, and then how do you relate with your literature reviews, and how do you relate that with your research questions. So Atlas T is an excellent tool. I can talk more about that if anybody want to ask, but this helped me in doing a very exhaustive data analysis. So there is a free version also, and there is a paid version also. You can have them, and then you can have more functionality using Atlas T. So that was for my data analysis. Can we go to the next slide? Very good. So just one sec. I think that's a maybe actually we'll come to this slide later. Actually, can we go to the next slide, Melanie? Yeah, this is. Yeah, after that we'll go for the finding. I think order is somewhere messed up. So here we'll talk about the interpretations. Exactly how do we interpret? So whomever I spoke, I found like pharmaceutical industry is very diverse, very complex, and heavily regulated. That's the reason. In any of the country you go, actually, here we have a FDA regulations. If you'll go to the Europe, you have a EMA regulations. You have SOX here, you have Basel in the Europe actually. So pharma industry is heavily regulated. For doing even a small work, you need to take a lot of approval from the authority actually, because it directly connects with the human health. So you just can't compromise on any of the things. So for implementing any of the digital strategy, you have to very sure. That's the reason it took a lot of time before digitalization came into the pharma industry compared to the other industry. So that was first of the interpretation while I spoke with all the senior managers. And obviously as per the best lesson learned and the success story from and based on my research finding, I found like whoever used their digital enablers, they have improved their business performance. I had a lot of numbers also that I can share with you actually improvement, but again, that's part of the quantitative. So the purpose of this study was mostly like qualitative, but it really improved the financial performance and added value to the business. So that is some of the interpretations. And again, the implementation is not the last thing. You need to do a continuous improvement in a system for being a successful. Your system has to be a sustainable. Whatever you implement it now, you have to think in the longer perspective, not in the short term, in the longer term. Like your solution is going to be sustainable. It has to be scalable also. Right now, my target customer is say 10. Tomorrow, if another 20 customer is coming, whether I want to scale it or not. So that is one of the most important thing from the business leadership perspective. And this is all part of a vision. So that was all about my interpretations. If we talk about limitations, so obviously my study focus was mostly from the United States. So that is something, because if you go to the other country, typically if you go to India, China, Philippines, so there are a lot of generic drugs are there. So maybe you will get a different information from there. In United States, we have a lot of controls. We have a lot of prescription medicine. But if you go to the other country, there are a lot of, gray market is there. There are a lot of non-prescription medicine. So obviously, if you'll work in the other market, you'll get more information. So that was one of the limitations. And I've used the qualitative. So ideally, I always love, I was speaking to my chair. So I always love the mixed method. But again, mixed method has a lot of limitations, like you have to have a lot of time and you have to do a lot of research in the mixed method. So it takes time actually, because here in the mixed method, you are using both qualitative as well as quantitative data. But in the future, probably I would love to do some more research on the mixed method where I'll use both qualitative and quantitative. And quantitative, you never know, because quantitative works on the metrics in the mathematical model and metrics also. That may give you more information. So I feel like those two were my biggest limitations. And the recommendations, or maybe actually I can come to the finding first and then I'll go to the recommendations. Melanie, if you can go to the previous slide, please. Okay. So this is when you do a qualitative, actually you have to establish a theme, and that's where the Atlas T processes help you. The Atlas T tools helps. So I have discovered 3 themes based on the interviews, based on all the data that I've collected from the business leaders. The first was constraints. Let me talk a few minutes about the constraints from the pharmaceutical supply chain perspective. So when we call it a constraint, what exactly the constraint? It's a barrier. Say for instance, in the pharmaceutical company, you can't directly supply to your customer. You have to have a third-party logistic 3PLs. We call it 3PLs actually. So you have to have a contractors in your actually who can supply your drugs. In the pharmaceutical supply chain, the pharmaceutical industry, you have a primary manufacturer, you have a secondary manufacturer. Say here you are manufacturing, say in the New Jersey, you are manufacturing, in Minnesota, you are doing a packaging. We call it a secondary manufacturing. You don't have this type of thing in the other industry as such. Actually, everything you can do in one establishment. And the raw material in the APIs, we call in the pharmaceutical industry, we call it a active pharmaceutical ingredients and active biological ingredients. So United States doesn't have those. So 80 to 90% of these things is raw material is being imported from either from China or from India. So this is one of the biggest constraints of supply chain, pharmaceutical supply chain. And again, if you remember the early days of COVID, when Pfizer was trying to supply, the transportation system required for vaccine to be maintained, actually minus 200, minus 180 Fahrenheit as such. Actually, there was absolutely no system. I worked in that system in Pfizer, so I know it was very difficult to come ahead with a solution to maintain all your vaccine at a particular temperature while it transports and while you store at a particular place. We call it in a pharmaceutical supply chain, we call it a cold chain processes. So you don't accept some of the food industry, you don't have this constraint in any of the other industries. So so these are few of the constraints. And again, you can't put a lot of cost, lot of pricing to your because this is all regulated by the government. Say for instance, if you are coming with a new drug, and if you want, say, I want to put it $100, you can't do that because it's all regulated by the insurance company. And then we have a middleman also. We call it a PBM, benefit manager actually. So there are a lot of constraints in the pharmaceutical industry compared to the other industry. And every industry, every organization also does have their own constraints as such. So first of all, you need to understand about the constraints. And the first thing, and that was the first strategy. And second is self-thinking supply chain deep understanding. Self-thinking supply chain is your supply chain process, your digital enablers, your processes has to be self-regulated. There are a lot of autonomous processes there. Say for instance, we use a robotics process analysis, RPA. That helps a lot of people actually in a lot of processes. And typically if you go to the research and development, we use machine learning. You have a code, so that reduce the timing. Otherwise, if you go to the industry, if you go for a research and development, it may take 10 years. But using machine learning or artificial intelligence, you can shorten that time. So that's all part of self-thinking supply chain. Third strategy was you have to have a vision. Without vision, you cannot do anything in the life. That is correct for the digital supply chain also. So you have to have an organization. Typically, the senior folks must have a vision, and their digital vision need to be aligned with the digitalization operations, because you need funding, you need support from your stakeholders. So this is all part of vision. Fourth was robust change management. Change management is everything, because you are changing the process, you are changing your business process, you're changing the way you are doing the work. So you have to have a change management process. You have to have a separate team who can talk to both internal as well as external stakeholder. So that was all. This 4 strategy was part of themes. Second was digital technology enablers. So digital technology enablers are nothing like but into system integrations, tools and technologies like ERP is there, you have artificial intelligence is there, machine learning is there, your robotic process automations are there, blockchains are there that is being used for the adverse event as such. So you have to have a business case. In any organization, you just can't go and ask your management to give you money. Actually, they won't give you. You have to create a business case for the work they have to do. And then you have to start on the small work. Every managers whom I talked, they all had a business case. They shared a business case with me, and they started the initiative on a small scale. We call it a piloting or prototyping. And once, just for one market, say for instance, if Pfizer is operating on 155 country, you just can't implement at first stage on the 155 country. You have to select one small geography, say for instance, United States. And in the United States also, you have to select, say, Minneapolis, one of the state out of 50 states. And you can run your project. If it's successful in that geography, then you do it on big bang. You run it on the global scale. So those 2 strategy was part of digital technology enablers. Third is, which is very, very important for staying in the market, you have to have a sustainability, you have to have a resilient and agile. Resilient, I mean the sense like you are down, say for instance, in your factory, you have some activity like actually the fire came, or in the corona, actually, everything was sort of shut up. So how resilient your process was? Did you have any arrangement like United States? Most of the raw materials were coming from China. So now the problem happened in China, and what it did, the raw material stopped coming. If you go to the automobile industry, they hardly have any version because they're not getting material from the other place. So that means like that your business is not resilient. You are just dependent on one of the sourcing vendors. So that is bad. So your business has to be a resilient. If it is going down by any region, but within a shorter span of time, it has to bounce back so that you can start continuing business and then continue with the profitability. So, but again, you need to know some of the measures. In the industry, we call it a KPI or key process indices that will tell you where exactly your process is, because that's the medium. You will tell, like, actually say my profitability this year was 2%. Next year it's going to be, next year whatever data I've got actually is 2.5%. So I've got a boost of 0.5%. So that is KPI. Your efficiencies right now, my efficiency is say 0.06%. And but when I do implement it, it is now 1%, and next year 2%. So this way you need to have, but you need to have a tool actually. We call it a KPIs. So ideally, if you'll see that these three themes and all these 8 strategies connected very well to my research questions, as well as my conceptual framework, which is theory of constraints. So can we go to the next slide now? Okay, no, not next slide, just before that. Yeah, I just left it in between. Yeah, so the recommendation I have already discussed about the interpretation limitations. The recommendation for the supply chain managers or anybody actually who works in the pharmaceutical industry or any industry, first to identify your constraint, and then you have to create your digital roadmap. Digital roadmaps includes all the digital enablers that you are going to implement. And then once you implement your system, you have to find a way to maintain it, to make it more sustainable. You have to make it more resilient and agile up to the business demand. Say, for instance, that today you're getting a demand of say 10, actually 10 quantity. But say if you're going into the winter, for the cough syrup, the demand from 10 vials, it is increased to 20 vials actually. So demand increase in 1 month. So you have to have agile actually. The moment the business is putting more demand, actually you have to have capability for fulfilling that. Otherwise they will go to your competitor, you lose your business. So you have to have a resilient, you have to have a agile. And one of the most important thing actually, and then I am very much fascinated with this, and that's what Walden also stands for social change implications. If you do a research, if it doesn't have a social change implication, then your research doesn't have any value, because it has to connect with a human value. That's what we call it, a social change. So I always, whenever I did a research, I always maintain, like, actually whatever work I'm doing, that is going to work for the social change. So one of the most important thing is the counterfeit product. Counterfeit product means, like, actually, there are a lot of people are in the market. You will not believe, but in the United States, we have 60 to 70% of the counterfeit product. We call it a gray market, because it does look the same. The label look the same. The packaging look the same. So we need to find a way, like, how to identify, like, actually this is not a counterfeit product, or this didn't come from the gray market. So digitalization helps significantly in that. We have a blockchain system that I've discussed in my research that can help you to identify or create a system to put a counterfeit system, and that will help you in the adverse event also. Adverse event is, like, actually it's impacting not the pricing, but it's impacting people's health also. So that was one of the major social change implications. And the second thing is the pricing. Everybody has strive for actually leading a good life, and good life can happen only when you have money to survive. So obviously, if you're paying more money to your insurance company, if you're paying more money to your provider, obviously you can't lead a good life. And that money, that pricing comes from the costing, whatever cost that pharmaceutical company has to pay, because they have to add on that and they have to take some profit. So if the pharmaceutical is the cost factor in a pharmaceutical industry is less, obviously, even though after putting profit, the cost will not be as much as it would have been there. So this digitalization helps you to complete visible. You have to optimize the process. You have to have visibility, and then that way you are reducing your cost. You're increasing your profitability, and in the end, it's a win-win situation for everybody. Even patient is paying less money. You are getting better profit. So these are some of the social change implications. We have so many, but these are two of the major social change implications. Excuse me. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. I don't know if I can I share my screen? It looks very very small.
Sure, let me pause my sharing here.
I'll do that. Okay. Just 1 second. Yeah. So this is the model actually. This again, the idea and everything, guidance and everything has been given by my chair, Dr. Gossett. I will also request him to talk a couple of minutes on this once I'm done, or maybe Melanie, if you want, actually you can, because this is the copyright thing that he has done, and then he has helped so many students with this system model. So what it does, system model is nothing. It's called a feedback model also actually. This is a complete crux of my research actually. This is excellent. If anybody want to see that, they don't want to go to my actually 200 pages of research, they just want to see the system model, they will understand what exactly I'm talking and how exactly they can do that. So you see that on the left side, system improvement, on the right side, this is system degradations. So when you implement all the measures, when you do all the things, these are the factors which is improving in the system, and these are the factor on the right side that is degrading if you're not taking all the measures. So that's the way we interpret it. And if you see this, you can have a wild card effect, third variable problem, or the other external factors. Say for instance is vision, I call it a wild card effect actually, or the effect on which you don't have any control. So that's what it start from. And then we have different constraints. Actually, I've just defined constraints for my study set. It can be market constraints, it can be capacity, logistic, behavioral, administrative constraints. So there are different constraints. Every organization has a different constraints. So again, from the world, they want to have an effective, cost-effective, and efficient pharmaceutical supply chain system. That's very, very important. For that, you need to have a strategy. So arrow points that, and here you'll see that in this particular block, there is a conceptual framework, themes, strategy. So this is my first theme, all four strategy. In the second, you have second theme, two strategy about which I have discussed, and in the emergence theme 3, I had two strategy as such actually. So everything is there. Once you are improving your processes, the system improvement will happen. Say for instances, you can have value adding opportunity, your profitability will increase, your competitive advantage, that is very, very important. Every organization strives for competitive advantage, and you can leverage your resources, you can leverage your capability of the organization will also increase actually if you are following all these things. Your collaborative responsiveness, that is very, very important. The information to the managers, because in the digitalization we have a digital analytic tool, we call it a big data also. If you have the information, the managers can take the decision based on those data. So these are some of the improvement points that I put it over here. And then system degradation, if you don't implement, then silos will increase actually. Nobody will have the information, everybody will be linear. Say for instance, if you want to go from one place to the other, the only way is either talking on the phone or actually just sending them an email actually. That's the process. So there is no automatic process. So that's the silos. Demand forecasting is one of the most important thing in the pharmaceutical supply chain, because you just can't overproduce because it has expiry date. So you need to know how much demand that you're going to get it from the market, from the people. So the accuracy of, obviously, if you're not implementing all those processes, your inaccuracy is going to be increased. Disruption, obviously, one of the most important, like we see in the corona, actually, the complete market is disrupted, complete supply chain is disrupted. So one of the major reasons few of the companies survived because they had a very good processes before corona happened. And obviously cold chain processes I discussed about maintaining your transportation system. So that will inefficient if you don't follow all the process. And if you do everything, you'll have in your hand your successful digitalized integrated supply chain system. It will be a sustainable, agile, and resilient. And then in the end, you see that in the end, actually, everything will actually point back to you. Actually, you will have a very effective and efficient pharmaceutical digital supply chain ecosystem. So this system model or feedback model. This is a crux of all my research. Melanie, I don't know actually if you can, if Dr. G want to share something, or if it's not allowed, because he helped me a lot on this.
Okay, yes, we just have a few minutes, so we might not have a ton of time for questions, but absolutely.
I just turned my mic on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, sir. We can hear you.
Well, one of the things about this that Manish is showing you is that If you can create a picture of your work or a picture of the problem and how you're going about solving it, you have really accomplished something that can be very helpful to a lot of people. So this negative feedback system works very similar to what happens when you have a thermostat. Here in Minnesota, where it gets cold at night, if the temperature drops to a certain point, my thermostat will kick on and activate the heating system, and it'll bring the temperature up to a desired level, just as it does in the summertime when the temperature goes up and it gets too hot and you need the thermostat to go on and kick on the air conditioning system to bring the temperature down so you're more comfortable. So what this model is showing you is the effects between variables that are directly related in the green versus variables that are inversely related. And it's a negative feedback system because if this system now works properly, it's going to reduce the demands and the needs and the wants in terms of this last feedback loop. The other thing that it helps do for managers is that 2/3 of their activities are generally related to the variables that are directly related to one another. If these themes and strategies do in fact work, these system improvements will take place. If they don't work and they go down, these system degradation variables will increase and have a negative effect on the system as a whole. So as a manager, you need to be able to manage both sides of this equation. When Manish talked about the key performance metrics, you need to have metrics that can give you the blood pressure, temperature, and pulse of these variables on both sides of the equation. And what you really need to have at the top is a dashboard that shows you if these things are operating within a safe range. They would reflect themselves in green. If they begin to move in the wrong direction, they're going to light up in yellow. And if they become problematic, there's a major disruption in the system, they're going to flash red. And so you have a very nice way of being able to show your staff, show stakeholders, show people who are interested, how this is both a science and an art in terms of managing the activities of a global supply chain system. Manish has over 30 years of experience, having also worked in over 30 countries around the world. And it was such a pleasure to be able to work with him to help him pull this together so that he could really highlight the fact that even though he's studying and reporting on and identifying strategies that other managers have developed and used in a successful fashion, there's some real value to that. Sometimes I used to believe that we needed to work on problems that didn't have solutions. But what we're doing does have value, and by using systems theory in this fashion, as Will talked about this morning, you can really help the student, put the capstone on their study. The other thing that is significant is that Manish and I were involved in the publication of 5 separate studies in the first 6 months of this year. He graduated, what was it, in February, Manish?
Yeah, in the March. Yeah.
Yeah, we co-published 5 separate studies in peer-reviewed journals, and those articles that we co-published, each one of them had a model like this, which you could see if you go to researchgate.net and type in either my name or his name. But those 5 separate articles have now been downloaded over 3,000 times since these publications occurred. And so there is a lot that shows you the significance of supply chain problems and issues, and shows you what can happen contributing to a positive social change when you're able to bring something to the table that could be very helpful to people. So it was my pleasure to work with Manish. And if you have any questions, if we have any time left, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks a lot, Dr. G. I really appreciate your good work and the help that you provided to do this, this study. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Melanie, do we have any other question, or we are just 11:15, 15 past 11 my time? So are we running out of time?
I'm going to pull up my slides really quickly here, just to return to that PowerPoint. And we do have a couple of questions in the, or at least one question here in the chat, so we can answer that one from one of our attendees here. The question is, what from your experience in this study should cold pharmaceutical supply chain professionals be paying attention to in the upcoming years?
Okay, so when we call it a cold chain pharmaceutical supply chain, this is all related to the transportation or storing of your pharmaceutical products. So it can be your pharmaceutical drugs, or it can be your pharmaceutical equipment as such. So we are doing a lot of work. In fact, I was also involved in a couple of the projects when Pfizer has been doing this prototyping just during the COVID. So I was sort of actually also involved from my company for a project. So we do develop next version of the IoT. Actually, we call it a industrial IoT, and the second version actually IoT 2. So initially we have a IoT where a lot of smart sensor. So we have developed a lot of technologies, and that is clubbed with the big data, because once you are moving your material, you have everything stored inside your container, but you don't know actually what the situations, and the situation worsen when you are trying to actually load the material, or you're actually getting a material out and then you are sending it to the ship, and then when it is going to the other country as such actually. So you have to know, and sometimes customer also demand, actually they want to know. I'm not just talking about the temperature, I'm talking about the other conditions also in the cold chain. Say for instance, humidity, moisture. Say one of the diagnostic equipment that we prepare. So if there is any moisture that happens during transportations, actually customer is not going to pay that, because it creates some adverse event. So there are a lot of development happening in the cold chain processes. A lot of companies are coming, they are putting a lot of projects. They're just making it sure whoever the transporter they are hiring, they have a very, very efficient and robust control change process. That cold chain processes, their containers are well equipped with all the processes. We are getting the information all through the process till the time it reaches to the customer. So a lot of works are happening in the cold chain pharmaceutical industries as such. Me and Dr. G publish a paper on the cold chain. So if anybody is interested, like I can send a paper on the cold chain. It is there on the ResearchGate also. But we'll be happy to help actually if anybody want to know more about the cold chain process in the pharmaceutical industry.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for sharing your presentation with us.